It doesn't get any better for Malcolm Turnbull and the Liberal Party. The latest polls out early this week show a 10-point gap between the Liberal Party and the opposition ALP. Well, it's no great surprise that that the Liberals are on the nose. I've been complaining about them for 18 months or more. They just haven't been responding to the calls of the grassroots supporters to get things moving. There's a lack of confidence in the electorate, in business and amongst the voters, and something needs to be done. Malcolm Turnbull just isn't up to the job. I think it's a great laugh, though, that all that the Liberals can do is blame Tony Abbott for the malaise in the opinion polls, and that is just ridiculous. Actually, Tony Abbott may have had a very marginal effect upon those polls, because he has basically identified that there are major issues with the Liberal Party that need to be addressed for it to get itself out of this slump. A lot of Conservative voters just will not touch that party with a 10-foot pole these days. They're just drifting. They're drifting because they've got a leader who doesn't have his heart in the job. He's just not. He's not a Conservative. He's. I don't know where he sits politically. It's left of centre somewhere, but it's just not. It's not a very good fit for the Liberal Party, and it's causing a lot of tension. And of course, I'm not impressed with the team either, as I mentioned earlier. Chris Pine, I think, is a bit of a drop kick, to be honest with you. And of course, Scott Morrison is a super egotist who basically really doesn't know as much about economics as he might think. And he's not turning out to be a particularly great treasurer. The only one I think would look worse than him would be Wayne Swan, who was an absolute disaster. But I'd say Scott Morrison is looking to be probably one of our worst treasurers ever. He doesn't get it, and his arrogance won't allow him to learn. In a way, he and Turnbull have a lot in common. It's no surprise they're great mates. And then you got, of course, that the clown Christopher Pine. I mean, he just. He rubs me up the wrong way. I don't know about you, but he has got a big mouth, just like Scott has. And on top of these guys, you've got the ladies of the Liberal Party, the Romanovs, I'd call them these days, because they, it's the Bronwyn Bishop sort of mentality of, stuff the taxpayer. I'm going to spend up big and have a ball while I'm still in power. And of course, there is a general perception amongst the Liberals now that they're basically doomed. Their backbench is given up the ghost at this stage, which is quite extraordinary, seeing it's almost it can be up to 2 years before the next polls. Although I doubt whether they'll go the distance. To be honest with you, they're clinging to a precipice right now because they've only got one seat majority, and. Things are just getting worse and worse weekly for the Libs. And as I predicted, Malcolm Turnbull might have had a flash of fight in him about a week ago, and he took on Bill Shorten, who's a fairly soft target, really. If you've got for any decent Liberal leader, he's pretty easy to make mincemeat out of. And Turnbull actually finally went him and did get some political capital. But as I predicted, Turnbull went back into his shell this week, and he does that all the time. He's a repeat offender. You cannot rely on Malcolm Turnbull. He's not a guy you'd want in the trenches next year. He's not a guy I would want to have put my life on, because I just don't think he is reliable. I don't know. His personality isn't that type. It's not. He's not there to. He's not going to stick with you. He's and I just. I don't know, the Liberals, instead of actually maybe looking for another leader, it appears as if defeatism is now spread right throughout the ranks of the backbenchers, and they feel as though they can't possibly go for a new leader, even though It seems to be the obvious solution to their problems, especially this early on. And if they've got around 2 years to go before the next election, they've got plenty of time to get their act together under the tutelage of a decent leader. But there's two problems here, though. One is that they're absolutely gutless. They just don't want to make that decision. They've already got blood on their hands after what they did to Abbott, and I guess they just don't have the stomach for it now. And they're not that bright. I don't think they're very bright people. I think the Liberal Party pre-selection hasn't been working particularly well. It hasn't been getting the best and brightest, that's for sure. There's a lot of underperformers amongst them, and I think they might even suspect that. They might realise that they're very lucky to have seats in Parliament, and they're on borrowed time. And whatever they do is not going to help them get out of that situation. I don't necessarily agree with that, because the focus is always on the leadership team. And if the Liberals did get a new leader in and got rid of a few of the ministers, like Scott Morrison's the main one, has to go, but there's probably a few others that could be given the heave-ho, get some fresh faces in, and try to rebuild from there. As far as Abbott is concerned, he's tried to give good advice. You can regard him as a spoiler, but I think his advice to the party was quite sensible. So I wouldn't be knocking him for that. If they'd only listen to what he says, they might actually get somewhere. But I don't think Malcolm Turnbull's a man for listening. He's just not going to do that. So basically, they've nailed themselves to the cross. They're going to go down big time, and no one's going to be able to save them. I am hoping that an alternative is patched together in the meantime. I would ideally like to see Abbott leave the Liberal Party and join forces with someone like Mark Latham and maybe Cory Bernardi. Even though Mark Latham was an ex-Labor leader, he seems to have more in common with someone like Tony Abbott these days than his own party, who has lurched so far to the left that Mark Latham can't possibly work with them. And he would now be regarded on the right wing of the Liberal Party, Mark Latham, and that's quite a transformation considering he was the leader of the Labor Party. That's how much things have changed with the politics in this country. Is it any wonder that One Nation under Pauline Hanson is making ground? I mean, they've got some crazy policies, but in spite of that, they're still doing okay. Pauline certainly is a much better front woman than she was in the past. She's much more articulate and on top of the issues than she was. So she thinks she's done a bit of groundwork, and she's learnt from her mistakes, and there's plenty of that, plenty of examples of that occurring in politics. But if I was, if I was Robert Menzies, I'd be pretty disillusioned with what's happened to his party, the people that have infiltrated it, fifth colonists in effect that have basically that have now more in common with the Greens and Labor than they do with traditional Liberal Party values. The real nail in the coffin for me this week was when the 18C committee came back and basically didn't want to do anything to change that law, which is basically curtailing free speech in Australia. The 18C is the Discrimination Act, and they basically have recommended that we don't change it. Extraordinary. It was a multi-party committee, but even the Liberals on that committee voted with the Greens and Labor. What's going on? This is really weird. It just shows you how corrupted the Liberal Party's become. And that's why people who are true Conservatives are just leaving the party in droves and will not vote for them again. It's bizarre that they're not prepared to actually change. You'd think, self-interest would rule. Normally it does, but they don't seem to have self-preservation in mind anymore, which is very strange for politicians. you don't think of them as being the types that would just lie down and die. They'd fight to the bitter end to keep getting the privileges that they have in Parliament. It's quite extraordinary. Strange times we live in. So basically, they're not going to listen to their former leader, who was the one who got them a mass of votes and seats the first time round. They're going to stick with a guy who's basically had all that nearly all the majority that they had under Abbott eroded in the last election, and obviously this Malcolm Turnbull is not a popular man with the electorate. He's losing popularity hand over fist, and it's not going to get any better. But try telling the backbenchers, they're thick as bricks, just absolute drop kicks. And I wonder if they'll be able to find jobs elsewhere, because I'd say a few of them are pretty well unemployable the way they act. Oh well, that's Australian politics. It's very sad. I'd hope that we get a decent leader rising through the ranks, at least America appears to have a decent president. So we can only hope that something will happen in Australia that will turn things around, but I don't see it happening too soon.